A very good evening to you. We are definitely heading towards a safer, cleaner and greener environment. A very warm welcome to a special panel discussion focusing on maintaining sustainability and green tourism. And this is conducted in line with the 9th ABU Media Summit on Climate Action and Disaster Prevention to be held in Colombo, Sri Lanka. That will be taking place on the 25th and 26th of November. So we have a very important panelist with us today who will be touching on promoting eco-friendly tourism practices, sustainable urban planning and resilient infrastructure development for tourism in Sri Lanka. So I'd like to introduce our panelists today. We have the Honorable Deputy Minister of Tourism, Professor Ruwan Ranasinghe. A very warm welcome. And we also have Ms. Aziza Yusuf, the Deputy Country Program Manager of the UN Human Settlements Program, which is also very well known as the UN Habitat Sri Lanka. A warm welcome to our panel discussion.
Good evening.
Good evening. And we do have Ms. Mona Chabranand, Technical Lead, Resilient Recovery and Private Sector Engagement, ADBC Bangkok, who's joining us today virtually. A very warm welcome to you as well, Mona.
Thank you very much and greetings.
Thank you very much for accepting our invitation and for being here with us for this very timely discussion, I'd say. So I'd like to start off with the Honorable Deputy Minister. So what government actions are being implemented to ensure sustainability in the tourism sector?
Right. Sharifa, now I need to clarify about the manifesto, especially when we went to the people. We promised that we will build a tourism economy that is sustainable and inclusive. So that is our vision for tourism, and in line with this vision, there are number of projects, activities and development plans that we have put into operation to ensure this vision that we reach. Of course, that is long term. We all know that tourism is a bit of a complex activity, socio-economic and ecological. So in all these contexts, we need to ensure sustainability. Well, that will be only giving us the expected outcomes. So for example, if I take now, there are a number of development programs that are underway. We are working with ADB. Now we have been actually running the tourism business for decades. Now if we take today, when we look back, now we have Sigiriya as one of the leading attractions at the moment, and then we have Yala down south and the beaches. But if we go to in detail to these attractions and the activities we do, how sustainable they are. As per the photographs and the complaints, the number that I'm getting daily, because we are now heading to the peak season also, I feel like I mean we have lot more to do. So if we take Sigiriya for example, the carrying capacity is becoming like challenging. So in line with this, now we have planned a similar development project next to Sigiriya, that is Pidurangala, so that we can ease some of the traffic there. Going back to Yala, in fact I was there day before yesterday, you know, to share my experience on that day. When the local community around who are operating these safari jeeps, you know, they got the news that we are coming there. DG, myself, we visited, and 200 of them with the safari jeeps, they were on a protest against, in the sense like they are asking. They also must have the opportunity to go into the park. That was the request. So I checked with the wildlife officers, and already there are 562 jeeps registered and 200 more in queue. So there is definitely a sustainability issue there. And this problem, like, I mean, we need to engage the other agencies like Department of Wildlife Conservation, Ministry of Environment and agencies like that. So maybe we will have to, like, of course, we are working on a program carrying capacity assessment. For example, at a given time, how many jeeps, safari jeeps, can be inside the park, and then we have to rotate them. Yeah, so these kind of things, and in line with that as well, we are developing few more other options. Like, of course, when a visitor comes from overseas, with an eye to go into the wildlife park and watch some leopards, so we need to give some other options, maybe like Galge entrance or Lunugam Vihara, some other options, and even declaring this most demanding Palatupana entrance something, exclusive. So these kind of controls we are working on. So overall, there are two areas that we are looking at: policy and development, and the practice. Now these two, we need to ensure, as I said, some of the development projects, like to parallel to this traffic, as I mentioned, at Sigiriya. So we are working on development project in Galewela, Kalaba, and this zone. So all our future development projects will be very strictly in line with the ecological balance and the environmental concerns. And also there will be strict regulations coming in, monitoring and legal enforcement against bad practices. I'm sure we watched this whale watching video very recently. So there will be controls and legal enforcements on practices, as well as focus on sustainability and balance with the ecology, as well as socio-economic as well, in the development efforts as well.
And also, Professor, you mentioned something very interesting. You spoke about inclusive tourism as well. How can this be incorporated?
Yeah, well, once again, if we go back, like tourism, still after nearly 7 decades of tourism business, I think places like inside the country, if we take now, there are a lot of demands. When I'm in the parliament, our colleagues, they come and tell, well, Deniaya or around Singaraja rainforest, and these areas very attractive, why not tourism there? When we go up down to, I mean, somewhere, Nuareli and hill country, beautiful sceneries, landscapes, and the culture and the lifestyle of people. Now these things, whether we have really make tourism experience and products, my answer will be no. So there is lots more. So that is inclusivity. So instead, this traditional tourism flow, we need to bring that back to the lives of communities and mobilize them into this business. That is inclusivity, and we are working on that as well.
And we have Mona, who's joining us today virtually, speaking of how we could focus on sustainability while also incorporating new ways and means of attracting tourists into the country. I'd like to touch on things which has occurred as well, about natural disasters. We faced several natural disasters, then lockdowns and all that. So what measures, Mona, can be implemented to protect tourists and tourism infrastructure during natural disasters like tsunamis, and also at the same time ensure safety in such emergencies?
Thank you, Sharifa. Before I begin, to share my thoughts with you, I want to make a little bit of a submission here, which is with regard to the phrase natural disasters. There is an entire school of thought that strongly feels that there is nothing natural about disasters. Hazards are natural. An earthquake is natural. A flood can be natural. But when it turns into a disaster with all the negative consequences, uh, it is not a natural phenomenon anymore. There is something that we can do about it. So that is really the fundamental premise of what I'm going to share with you about, what can be done. And with my background in architecture and planning, um, I would attract your attention to 4 steps that we can follow to prevent the negative impacts of hazards from impacting us. So the first step is really at the planning level itself, and what the Honorable Deputy Minister was just saying. How do we look at tourism fitting into the larger complex web of relationships and resource flows at the area level. So we've had the examples of the coastal regulation zone after the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. There's also, so what you were talking about in terms of, what you said as carrying capacity. Bhutan is already following what they call controlled tourism in Bhutan. So these are some examples in which we can look at how we plan tourist facilities and their location and their, I would say resource flows, people coming in, services also mobilizing, waste being generated, economy being, positively impacted with tourism. So at a planning level, it's a very complex web. And I'm so happy that you used the word complex to describe it. I would go a step further and say, it's a system that's operating there, which comprises of several mini systems. So it's important at a planning stage to take cognizance of how this larger system, allows smaller systems to work together and in peaceful tandem. That's the first step. Second step, when we look at the design of the facilities themselves, there's a lot that can be done. And I want to give you an example of, one coastal observation tower that I had the privilege of visiting in Awaji Prefecture in Japan. And I heard that there are many more like that. So these coastal observation towers are multi-storied structures built to the best engineering standards possible. And this is where they can monitor the tsunami and other hazards, and they can also educate people on how disasters happen. When a hazard turns into a disaster, what can people do themselves? And these are evacuation sites that people can house themselves in should there be danger of some major hazard occurring in that area. So the design of the facility itself can serve many purposes, from just tourism to education, and also to help people take refuge in the time of crises. That's the second step around design. My third step around construction itself. The March earthquake in Thailand, yes, there were deaths and there was a one major building collapse that was reported, but much of the hotel industry was temporarily impacted because there was fear in the vicinity of these hotels and all. But if I'm not wrong, none of the hotels suffered any impact due to the earthquake. So the construction itself of the facility has a large role to play with regard to disaster, mitigating the impact of hazards on people. And the last step is around how we maintain and use tourism spots. uh, I want to share with you an example from Nepal, where Sagarmatha Pollution Control Committee, which is a community-based local NGO that works with the Ministry of Culture to look at how the waste from the mountains can be brought down when people are coming down after trekking. So these kind of things, and this also sort of resonates with what the Deputy Minister was just talking about, involving communities. So my simple submission is that right from the planning stage itself to the design of facilities, construction, maintenance, and use, there's an entire continuum of entry points that are available to us to prevent the extreme impact of hazards from manifesting for our people and our businesses as far as tourism is concerned. Thank you.
Absolutely, Mona, and I like how you phrased it. It's not natural anymore, because I think everybody plays a role in contributing towards the disasters we face these days, not just in Sri Lanka but around the globe, as you did mention very correctly. And speaking of education, Mona, just to touch on what you discussed with us, and you took us through several steps in which we could work on. And speaking of education, do you think that this should be incorporated on a school level?
100%. 100%. I mean, I'm forgetting the name of the little girl I think she was from the UK, visiting Thailand at the time of tsunami. And she was told, or she had learned about the tsunamis at school, and she could save so many lives by alerting people that this is what a tsunami looks like, let's evacuate, right? So school education, universities, our youth, a lot of the population in South Asia is going to be elderly as we move forward into the next decade. So our youth have a huge role to play with regard to their own safety and the safety of others around them, that belong to different age brackets. So definitely education has a huge role to play. This is, as far as the people are concerned, definitely the training of personnel and the frontline workers, whether it is your, the health workers or the childcare workers at the community level. These are people who take the messages of safety to the household. So education and
Absolutely.
training, huge role to play.
Absolutely, Mona. And I'd like to speak to Aziza as well. We spoke of sustainability, Aziza. Sustainability in the tourism sector is vital to cater ecosystems, that's coastal and wetlands. So with the background from UN Habitat, how can the concept of sustainability be incorporated when we work on new venue developments for tourism, as the Honorable Deputy Minister did mention about how we could facilitate many things with regards to the demands we have right now. So what can we do?
So sustainability actually encompasses the whole economic, socio-cultural and environmental sustainability. So any new tourism development, it is imperative that all these aspects are considered. So I would not actually emphasize or focus on the economic and financial sustainability, which the tourism operators are much better equipped than me. So I would be mainly looking at environmental sustainability, because tourism can and is having a huge negative impact, both by the way of carbon emissions as well as like generation of waste and negative impacts on biodiversity and ecosystems as well. So in developing new venues, it is really important, as the Deputy Minister and both Mona mentioned, that we take into account the carrying capacity of a venue. And what we need to do is to augment what is available. So for Sri Lanka, we really don't have to create anything from scratch, like maybe while countries like Dubai and Singapore do have to create things from scratch.
We're kind of blessed, aren't we?
We are really blessed. So we really need to augment what we have and actually make them destinations. So for that, I would say, in the planning itself, the physical planning itself, and the policies and regulations should be guiding the developers into and the investors into investing in something sustainable. And I would look at the whole process from the overall physical plans or the urban plans of the tourism destinations, the construction of new buildings, retrofitting of existing buildings into tourism facilities, then the operation and maintenance of tourism facilities, and also the demolition and disposal of the tourism facilities. All that need to be environmentally very conscious. They need to be low emission. They need to have resilience and adaptive capacities to climate change and disasters, and also have the lowest be resource efficient and have the lowest impact on ecosystems and biodiversity. On social sustainability, I would think that tourism we need to downplay the negative impacts of tourism on society, which we have I think experienced right from the beginning, from the 70s, etc. And also ensure that both the guests, the vulnerable persons within the guest component and also the community component, they are positively benefited by tourism. So it's about having universal access in tourism facilities, like for persons with disability and the elderly persons. And
Again,
it is also
inclusivity comes into play.
yes,
Yeah.
and it is also about including local communities in the development and also making them beneficiaries of the whole development process. And then on cultural sustainability, it is about augmenting both the tangible cultural assets and as well as the intangible cultural assets like the dance forms, the foods, the cultural practices and traditions, etc. So that needs to be considered right through the tourism new venue development processes. And one thing I really miss in Sri Lanka is that tourism is not being, like, very attractive places are not being promoted as destinations. They go dead in the night. During the day there are enough activities to do, but they do not showcase their culture and all that. So I think that these things need to be considered while very strict control to ensure that the negative impacts of tourism are minimized.
Honorable Deputy Minister, would you like to add to that?
Well, yes, agree. Now, for example, if you take Colombo, number of activities that a tourist can do at night is almost, very limited. So, focusing on this, there is a project that we are working on to develop Marine Drive as a night bazaar and some including some cultural activities which is coming up, and certain activities and illumination around the Bay Lake. Likewise, there are a number of activities. Of course, it should be like keeping the environment, like if we, in the case of Marine Drive, the beach clean and with solid and liquid garbage management systems and things. There are much more to think before we jump into an undeveloped tourism attraction, particularly ecologically fragile area. So there is a lot more to plan and think.
Absolutely. And Honorable Minister, how can we maintain a balance between tourism and ecosystem within the same environment? And what are the government's plans to achieve this in the future?
Well, to answer very briefly, it should be controlled. Yeah, because now if we take the traffic, this small island of 65,000 square kilometers, how many tourists we can afford to? So that's I mean, even
Are we going to have a cap?
Yeah. Well, I feel like it should be somewhere around 4-5 million, definitely less than 5 million per annum. Now it was discussed about Bhutan, what they are doing, their controls. So at the moment we are working on certain numbers, but of course these numbers we need to look at some quality in the sense, how many dollars per tourist spent per day. That should be the key focus. But we cannot just increase that without enhancing the tourism product offer. So that is what I think in the long run that we need to work on. So our program or the development of tourism industry is definitely on capacity management, as well as looking at the maximum economic benefit that we can get from it. This is what I mentioned earlier, mobilizing the communities. I mean, this economic benefit should be transcend to the lives of people. It is not just, bringing tourists and, working a couple of organizations around it. So we need to bring activities and programs to bring the tourism benefit down to the local economy. So there is a huge portion of the tourism income going out as well. So coming back to your original question, like maintaining the balance, it is ecology, society and the culture as well as a key concern. Now, for example, an area like Ella, if we take, used to be a beautiful and nice place a couple of decades back, but not anymore. Yeah, extensive development, as well as the social situation, if we concern, and the cultural. I think there is degradation in. I mean, people are more into the economic values, money, and things like that. And if you go to of course that's in one way tourists enjoy it. As a local, I'm doing as well. But late night, if you go, yeah, there are a lot of complaints that we are getting, noise and too much music and things like that. So these things we need to control, like in order to balance the traditional, normal way of life of the communities and people, as well as the tourism business. Yeah, as a country, if we take the capacity management, including all the destinations and planning, as well as controls. Yeah, so those are key areas we need to ensure the balance. For this, we are working on a number of programs. For example, this year we actually won National Sustainable Tourism Certification Award for Sigiriya. So we are working on several more destinations to be certified as sustainable destinations, and we are working on several beaches for Blue Flag certification. Yeah, likewise, there are a number of efforts, and also special loan schemes under concession interest rates we have been introduced under the Ministry of Industries and Entrepreneurship Development for tourism businesses as well, especially if they are working on sustainable and environmental concerns projects. Even the interest rates will be lesser, so to encourage them. And award programs and recognitions, there are much more that we are working on to ensure the balance between the ecology, society, and the economy in performing tourism as a business.
Absolutely, as you did mention very correctly, we see a lot of people coming into Sri Lanka in terms of business, as Sri Lanka is also considered a MICE destination, isn't it? So we see a lot of people coming down for destination weddings, then events, and much more. Yeah. So I guess we need to, as you very correctly mentioned, Honorable Deputy Minister, that we have to have a balance and also make sure that there's a set of rules and regulations initiated or implemented before things can actually be introduced into this sector further. So I'm going to shift to Mona, and we will be touching on assessing the overall safety of the tourism sector from a disaster management perspective, and what specific focus should be given to protect tourists and tourism facilities.
Thank you, Sharifa. I would again draw your attention to the centerpiece of this conversation, which is tourist facilities, tourists, and the people who run the facilities themselves also. So if the problem statement is how do we ensure their safety, then there are a few steps that I can share with you. ADPC being a regional international organization, I have loads of examples from the region to give. With the other two panelists, the Honorable Deputy Minister and my old friend Aziza there's little that I should be talking about Sri Lanka really. So I will give you some examples from elsewhere. So with regard to the assessment, if I wear my scientist and practitioner hat, then to assess the risk so that you can take care of safety involves a couple of things. One is an understanding of the hazard types and frequency and the impact that they can cause. And these can be many hazards, more than one. Like in the case of Sri Lanka, we know there's the tsunami as a hazard, there's drought as a hazard, extreme heat now, flooding we have seen. So though, it can be many hazards. So that's the hazard. And then of course, what are the elements at risk and how vulnerable they are? So the facility, its condition, the number of people occupying the facility, the number of people depending on the facility for their livelihood, etc., etc. So, this is one example of the element of at risk that we have to assess the vulnerability, and then what kind of capacities do we have? Whether people are educated or not, whether there's early warning or not, whether there is a solution with regard to response in place or not. So this is really what we are looking at when we are identifying and understanding risk. And I do want to underscore the point that Aziza was also alluding to earlier, which is around the uncertainty to do with climate change. So actually, in my world, in disaster management and risk reduction field, people are now saying that we're not dealing with risk anymore. We are dealing with uncertainty. So how do you plan for some degree of predictable uncertainty in that sense? Another example is with regard to extreme heat that we are seeing more and more evidence of that. And it's interesting to note that 60% of the cases of heat stroke are the elderly and outdoor people outdoors. And when it comes to tourism in places like Sri Lanka, the elderly also visiting Sri Lanka and even Thailand for that matter, a lot of outdoor activity. So how do we take care of heat stroke? This is really around defining what we are looking at as a risk there. Then the next step would be to plan and take countermeasures to prevent or reduce the negative impacts of these hazards. Again, another interesting example from Japan, they are now building tsunami walls, and these are double layered. So there's uh, I was reading somewhere some 9 million trees have been planted to slow waves and trap debris in the case of a tsunami. And then at the back of that is, of course, a concrete wall. And now the concrete walls are also being sort of handled innovatively where, these are like flaps. So if there is a tsunami, the wall just comes up like that. And the idea is not that this whole wall will be able to withstand the impact of the tsunami, but it can delay the impact enough so that people can evacuate. So these kind of countermeasures we can take. Another example I'll give you from our own work in Bangladesh, where with communities through an on-the-job training kind of a formation, we help them build hilly roads or hilly walkways actually in Cox's Bazar, which is again a very popular tourist destination. And this was done as a training on the job, so people can do it and maintain it in the future on their own, and also using biomaterials so that the impact of this activity, environmental impact, is minimal. So these are some of the ways of we can take these countermeasures. And then going back to your earlier point about education, so how do you educate people and train them should there be a major event that impacts people, which also requires access to communication and evacuation. So of course, we have to plan in case there is a big event, where will people be moved? Will they be safe there? Will they have adequate food, water, shelter, sanitation to be housed, temporarily while things are settling down? So that's the fourth step. And then fifth step is around rapidly and appropriately responding. At ADPC, we work very closely with response forces. I'm actually involved in a project in India. I know my colleagues are in Sri Lanka. I have already been working with your responders also. How do we help them understand in case there's a collapsed structure? How do you extricate people out of a collapsed structure without causing further harm? In case there's a fire, how do you get people out, etc.? In case there's a rapid flood, how do you help people rescue people in that sense? So that kind of education and training to rapidly and appropriately respond is important. We need the equipment. We need the protocols for, from translating early warning to early action. So these are things that are required. And finally, once the event is over and our businesses, especially around tourism, and not only the core hotels and restaurants and whatever, your taxi guys, your people who are selling fruits and food on the streets, etc., etc., these people who support the tourism industry, in a peripheral way, how do you help them come back and recover from the impacts of this event? How do you maintain business continuity in the interim while full recovery happens? So these are some of the things that we normally in disaster risk reduction and resilience world we take care of as steps to assess and then prevent the impact from prevent these disaster events from adversely impacting the communities.
Absolutely, Mona, as you very correctly mentioned about spreading awareness and education is vital, and especially to the community. And it's not just people who can make decisions, but I think the general public plays a pivotal role in this as well, and also they contribute towards tourism in a major way. So I think what you mentioned is a collective measure. It's not just an individual task and one organization can get together and do something in a day or two, but I think we need to talk about this further as well. So this is just one step where we spread awareness as well via these panel discussions. So since we touched about development activities, Aziza, we spoke about how we could focus on what may happen, and it's all about predictions and assumptions because we are uncertain about what we might face. So well, Mona did highlight a very, very interesting example about how Japan has constructed something which they foresee might happen. So we as Sri Lankans also know a few things. So tourism development activities, especially the construction and maintenance of tourist facilities, must be eco-friendly as well at the same time, Aziza. So how can we ensure accountability in maintaining environmental sustainability of those establishments?
Yes, so both operation and maintenance, and also what we need not forget is what we need to remember is that also the decommissioning and disposal of buildings or other infrastructure, as well as the construction, all of these need to be very environmentally sensitive. So of course Mona touched on the more resilient and adaptive capacities, whereas I would touch more on the low emission pathways, as well as being nature based and resource efficient. So for construction, the design itself could actually be more climate sensitive, and I mean climate sensitive not just in the current context, also looking at future climate prediction scenarios and accommodate that into the design, both in structurally as well as for passive heating, more or less passive cooling in the Sri Lankan sense, where you use less energy for cooling and making it also like more resource efficient, where you use the minimum amount of construction materials. Also using local materials which are much more less carbon intensive than imported materials, and using local labor and skills. So in addition to that, we will be also looking at nature-based solutions and ecosystem-based adaptation measures in designing these tourism venues. So when you mean nature-based solutions, it would be like, are you going to use like concrete pavements, or are you going to use permeable pavement blocks which have grass between it, and then also acts as a absorbent for the storm water, like enhancing drainage. So and for heat, do you use air conditioning, or do you combine fans and other cooling mechanisms with improved ventilation and planting? So it is about that. And then overall you need to look at the whole life cycle of what you are using, up to the last light bulb, your air conditioners, your laundry systems. All the mechanical systems need to be looked in too as well. And here I would say we find that Sri Lanka has at least 7 LEED certified tourism facilities, ranging from like 5-star hotels right up to boutique hotels, and also many facilities which are certified by the Green Building Council of Sri Lanka, which is affiliated to the World Green Building Council. So to ensure this is taken further, I would suggest that maybe the Tourism Development Authority, when they are providing approvals, they could also incorporate more of these controls where the buildings could be safer and greener into their approval processes, and maybe have things like rating systems and all that, which actually carry a lot of weight in to travel platforms, as they term categorize these venues as sustainable venues. So which is very much in line with what the ministry is trying to do. And of course, things like even local authorities could have in their laws and regulations to have these controls on future tourism infrastructure and buildings.
Since we're on the topic of tourism and about how we could have a ranking and grading system, as Aziza mentioned, so I'd like to ask the Honorable Deputy Minister about that, because we see now when it comes to tourism, we speak about big hotels, we speak about boutique hotels and five-star hotels or any hotel which is known to provide accommodation. So now we see homestays, which is also catching up, I guess, and I think people just book online and come and stay at different houses. So now, do we have a system to check on the facilities before they register under any platform where they could rent it out?
Well, Sharifa, yes, is the short answer, but there is a very complex challenge that we have found. Actually, more than 90% are not registered. Okay. So that is the whole issue that we have, in the sense, like, you know, tourism, going back, so 1960s we started this with the central body here, SLTDA, Sri Lanka Tourism Development Authority, the central responsible agency. But with the development of this technology, online travel platforms and things, tourism service providing businesses were mushroom around the country, which is totally not under the regulation of SLTDA. So we have this challenge now, and in fact absorbing them into the system. But when now we have introduced number of programs when they run business. For example, this electricity bill concession for those businesses who register with us. There is a concession, and there are, as I said, subsidized loan schemes and much more benefits. So by introducing these, we are trying to get them. Well, for the organizations or the homestays that are applied for registration, we definitely go inspect and check with our criteria and give the clearance. Now, for not doing this, there are also some bad experiences. A couple of months back, if you could remember, there was a death of, you know, a couple of tourists here in Colombo at a substandard tourist accommodation place. So there are such, you know, issues also reported where we have not inspected and given the certification. So from the point of view of the clients also, I think there is a requirement where they need to check what kind of a sort of a place that they're going to stay. We have a management, a registration and a monitoring mechanism. Of course, we need to scale that up, because as I said, there is large number of new entrants to the business. So we need to man our bodies as well. So with the new act we have proposed, we are going to actually very closely incorporate the 9 provincial tourism ministries into the central body, that is SLTDA, and expand this registration and control mechanism as well.
It's about standardization as well, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Right, and we've come towards the latter part of this discussion as well. So, Mona, I'd like to hear a few final remarks from you.
Thank you, Sharifa. From me, I think the parting message would be, let's focus on resilience. And the word resilience includes disasters as well as climate resilience. And one thing that I very passionately feel about the word resilience is the ability to accept that things will fail, right? So we plan for failure. Up to what extent can I tolerate failure? What will I do in case of failure? So, you know, for example, in case there is a total power outage because of a flood, what will we do in that case? How many hours of fuel backup do we have to run basic, essential services? What will happen beyond that? How will I manage my emergency operations in the meantime? So this is just one example. Likewise, evacuation sites. How many days can I house people in those evacuation sites, and what kind of resources will be required, whether it is food, water, waste management, etc., etc. So resilience is the word that I would like to leave all of us with. And even within resilience, the need to accept failure and plan for failure is something that I think we should remember when we are planning our work around the tourism sector. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shanaziza.
Yes, for me, I would say that tourism needs to take a very environmentally sensitive, low carbon development pathway, and it needs to be inclusive both for the guests as well as the communities, and as with the government's mandate, I would say the benefits of tourism, the economic and social benefits of tourism need to flow to the lowest income groups in the country, and also that any development should be also augmenting our tangible and intangible cultural heritage. And the final aim should be, while doing this, also to increase the spend per tourist for Sri Lanka, because this is such a beautiful and vibrant country, and I think that should be the end aim of all of us.
Honorable Deputy Minister.
Yeah, I think tourism is moving into a different level, where 1960s, 50s, like late when this commercial airline industry started, this was started to grow very fast. But that time it was luxury, beaches and number of visitors, it's mass tourism. But now I think we are moving into more slow tourism, which means tourists are engaged more with the environment, and living in there, getting experiences. So I think as a destination, Sri Lanka, we need to get ready or move out actually from that old traditional tourism thinking to this new one. So as a policy making body, I think ministry and the government, we are fully geared for that in terms of development controls as well as legal enforcement.
Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts, and thank you very much for being a part of this very timely panel discussion, I'd say. So thank you once again.
Thank you.
We were in conversation with the Honorable Deputy Minister of Tourism, Professor Ruwan Ranasinghe, Mona Chabranans, Technical Lead, Resilient Recovery and Private Sector Engagement of ADBC Bangkok, and Ms. Aziza Yusuf, the Deputy Country Program Manager of Human Settlements Program, UN Habitat, Sri Lanka. And we've been discussing on the topic maintaining sustainability and green tourism, revolving around the theme promoting eco-friendly tourism practices, sustainable urban planning and resilient infrastructure development for tourism in Sri Lanka. So this panel discussion was held in line of a series of panel discussions held because we have the 9th ABU Media Summit on Climate Action and Disaster Prevention, which will be held in Sri Lanka on the 25th and 26th of November. Thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll be back with another very interesting discussion.